Discover the amazing moment. A gunslinger revealed a widow's kindness, feeding 7 orphan kittens. Jake, a once-feared gunslinger, stood on the edge of the town square, the sun bearing down like judgment itself. At 35, his calloused hands had seen too much violence, and the scars on his skin whispered tales of reckless pasts. He had lived years as a ghost, drifting through the humid air of Texas, haunted by whispers and side-eye glances that should have been his only companions. But today a faint sound pulled him closer, a chorus of tiny mews fluttering against the backdrop of silence. Across the way, Mary bent low over a patch of dirt that had once flourished with color. A widow at 32, she tended to her modest garden with an unwavering faith that her memories would sprout anew. Each kitten she cradled to find a glimmer of love lost. Yet her smile, weary but warm, sparked something just beneath Jake's hardened exterior. Caught in the tangle of his feelings, Jake's gut twisted. Could he dare approach her? Could he lay bare his burdened spirit? The air thickened. The weight of expectation clung to him. The last time he had cared, had genuinely cared about someone, had led to bloodshed, heavy regrets, and shadows that never left. Walking closer felt like a betrayal to his own ghost. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The kittens mewed more insistently, and he found himself torn between his solitude and this opportunity. Time seemed suspended, a holder of breath as he stepped forward, surprising himself. Was he really going to help? Fear gripped him, but there was something in Mary's gentle effort struggling against her grief that pulled him in. Gossip prowled the streets more fiercely than the stray dogs that roamed. The townsfolk's eyes watched, silently judging. "Look at him," they whispered. The gunman and the widow. Each scoff and raised brow pricked Jake's skin like a bee's warning and sowed doubt in his mind. Was he just repeating history, trading one face of violence for another, masked now in unfamiliar tenderness? Yet the kittens thrived with each day he spent by her side, and her laughter even dared to echo through the thorns of his trauma. But just as hope brightened, a blight threatened to consume her garden. The lifeblood of her unsteady home was in peril, and he could feel the ground shift underneath their fragile bond. Amidst this brewing storm, Jake faced a band of men he had once fought and feared. They gathered on the outskirts of town, emboldened by the scorn of his past. He stood at the frontier of determination and despair, questioning whether he would plunge back into the chaos he'd fought to escape. Would he return to violence or protect the blossoming light in Mary's world? As the tempest rumbled closer, he felt the weight of everything they had built in the gloom of judgment. Would he rise up against them, or would his history dictate another tragic outcome? Lightning flashed, illuminating the depths of his plight as shadows closed in. In this charged instant, he had to choose, to keep running or to step into the role of protector. The storm was coming, and just like the thunder clashing above, his heart echoed the turmoil of their uncertain fates. Jake's pulse quickened as he stared down the men assembled in the dusty clearing. They were familiar faces from his past, their laughter once echoed in the bars where he spent far too many restless nights. Now their contempt had morphed into a weapon aimed directly at him. Was this how it felt to be cornered by demons? He had fought them before, had learned to shoot before he learned to love. But this time, the stakes were different. It wasn't just his life on the line. The specter of violence loomed, threatening to taint the flicker of hope he had sparked with Mary. The storm roared above him, thunder punctuating his thoughts like a drumbeat. There was no option for retreat, and he pondered the kind of legacy he wanted to leave, one of fear or one that might offer shelter, however tenuous. Closing his eyes for a fleeting moment, he visualized Mary's kind face, her laughter dancing around the darkness that pooled in his chest. He had to do more than run from his past. He had to confront it head on. "Jake," one of the men called, the taunt dripping from his voice like venom. "You think you can change? Look at you now, playing gardener with the widow. You were never more than a killer." Each word landed like a punch, stirring an ancient fury that threatened to overshadow his newfound resolve. Yet amidst the shouting, the mewing of the kittens brought an unexpected clarity. He had begun to feel a sense of belonging through the simple act of nurturing those vulnerable lives. Could he extend that same protection to Mary? With this thought, doubt transformed into determination. He stepped forward, his stance firm as he locked eyes with the man whose words had scraped the remnants of his self-worth. "You're right. I've done things I'm ashamed of, but I'm done being your punching bag. I'm here to protect what matters, and I won't let you bully me or anyone else in this town." The air thickened with tension and Jake's heart pounded louder than thunder. He caught glimpses of uncertainty in the eyes around him. Had they ever seen him stand tall against their intimidation? This was not the same man they had once known. The scarred figure who wore regret like armor had begun shedding it, revealing layers of a gentler fighter, a protector. A sneer twisted the leader's mouth, but Jake sensed a crack in his bravado, a moment's hesitation. That flicker of doubt only fueled Jake's resolve. He drew in a steady breath, the scent of wet earth and impending rain bolstering his spirit. He could feel Mary's unwavering support even from a distance. Her empathy was the armor he needed now. "Stand down or make a move," Jake declared, his voice steady despite the tremble of uncertainty lurking beneath. "But know this, I won't back down, not for you, and not for anything that comes." As Jake prepared for the confrontation that was about to unfold, a bolt of lightning illuminated the darkness more vividly than any street lamp ever could. He realized that he was not simply defending himself. He was igniting a change within. Could he transform from feared gunslinger to a source of courage and warmth? The answer lay ahead in the choices he would make, and as the first raindrops began to fall, mingling with the tension in the air, he understood there would be no retreat. The storm was not just above. It raged inside him, palpable and demanding action. The time had come to face his past, but would he emerge renewed or drowned in the flood of consequence? The rain began to drench the clearing, each drop a reminder of the tempest both outside and within. Jake felt it seep into his clothes, mingling with the sweat of anticipation and urgency. He was no longer waiting for their move. He was taking charge. The choice lay before him, stand firm or succumb to the deeply embedded fears of his former self. His fingers twitched at the side of his belt, where the weight of his gun reminded him of who he had been, but also, surprisingly, of a different identity he had begun to forge. With every passing second, he realized that he wasn't just battling the men in front of him. He was battling the ghosts of his decisions, the shadows of a man who had once found pride in the chaos. "Are you still there, Jake?" the leader taunted, his voice grating against the sound of rain. "I'd thought you would run screaming just like before." Resentment ignited in Jake, flaring hot and alive. Defensiveness swelled within him, but right beside it, like a flickering flame, was the burgeoning sense of purpose that had begun to define his path. This was not about proving anything to those men anymore. It was about the future he envisioned with Mary, the kittens, the love that had coaxed him out of the darkness. "Enough!" his voice rang out, surprising even him with its clarity. "You think I'm afraid? I'm not here for your approval or your vindication. I'm here to protect what matters." For an instant, silence enveloped the clearing, the storm momentarily holding its breath as if waiting for the outcome of this confrontation. It was only then Jake realized the potency of vulnerability. He was not just a soldier clinging to his weapon. He was a man making a choice, aligning his actions with a new moral compass. The leader, visibly unsettled, stepped closer, his posture shifting from braggart to predator. "So this is it? You found your heart again, playing gardener? Your strength means nothing to us." Jake felt the simmering tension on his skin and the tempest of doubt flash through his mind. But it was in this crucible that his thoughts crystallized. Life had not offered him many second chances, but every moment spent nurturing the kittens, supporting Mary, and shedding past habits had refocused his drive. How ironic it seemed. This very challenge slowly molded him from a weapon into a shield, What strength without purpose? Jake countered, holding his ground. Muscle and malice are as empty as a gun without a target. Before the leader could respond, something shifted in the air. A crack of thunder louder than any he'd heard before echoed ominously as lightning split the sky, illuminating shadows of doubt that flitted behind the men's eyes. Jake watched them hesitate, the bravado wavering and fear bubbling just beneath their facade. Could this be the moment they retreated? He could sense that he was about to deliver a decisive blow, but not with fists or firearms. You've hunted me long enough. Maybe it's time you consider hunting for something better instead. Confusion flickered across their faces. Hope flared like a beacon in him, urging him to dig deeper. His next words would either solidify this change or crumble under the pressure of his past. The tension snapped like a taut wire, and for the first time Jake wondered if perhaps he might emerge not only unscathed, but transformed. The men before him were not merely adversaries. They represented all he'd fought against, the man he refused to be any longer. Yet as they exchanged looks, weighing their options, Jake felt the rawness of its implications. Could he, this reluctant warrior, forge forgiveness where regret once raged? Every fraction of a second turned heavy as he awaited their move. Would they retreat, leaving behind the friction of their violence? Or would it end here in a tempest of fury? Jake held his breath, ready to embrace the unknown, unwilling to sink back into darkness. But the answer he sought lingered, just beyond his reach, hanging eagerly in the charged air. Would he ignite a spark of change? Or would he be consumed in the very storm he tried to outrun? As the thunder roared above, pulsating through the clearing, Jake's resolve shifted the atmosphere, morphing stormy chaos into a charged expectancy. The hesitant glances exchanged between the men before him were electric, an unspoken acknowledgement of the battle that extended beyond the physical. They had expected fear, but he had served them defiance, a defiance that unexpectedly rooted him in a conviction he barely understood himself. In the aftermath of his daring declaration, Jake's heart raced, not from adrenaline but from a burgeoning awareness of its implications. The doubts that crept into his mind felt foreign. Gone was the instinct to flee. Instead, he felt an insistence rising within him, a beckoning pulse towards accountability. For the first time he recognized the freedom in standing up for what he valued, and it seized him with unrelenting clarity. "What's it gonna be?" he called out, tone steady, eyes unwavering. In the silence he noted a subtle but unmistakable shift in the group's demeanor. A tentative retreat, perhaps? Was it the sincerity in his voice that had disrupted their bravado? The leader, fists tightening and jaw clenching, seemed to wrestle with something intangible. "You think you can change us, Jake? You think you'll sway us with your pretty little speech? Why not? You want to break me, but I'm here only to show you there's more than this." Jake gestured broadly, his arms open as if to embrace the very fears that they had wielded against him. The irony of the confrontation flooded over him. He was no longer just defending himself. He was offering a glimpse of the future he was constructing, not just for himself, but for those trapped in the same cycles of devastation that had once consumed him. With each heartbeat, that vision deepened. Mary's laughter echoed in his ears, the purring of the kittens warming the contours of his memory. He fought not only for his freedom but to inspire change, even within hardened hearts. Could he catalyze that shift in others? The question held the weight of potential redemption. As thunder cracked, Jake felt the storm not just as a backdrop but as a transformative agent, a cleansing rush that could sweep away the dark clouds. The moment felt pivotal. He zeroed in on the leader's flared nostrils, the uncertainty deepening the crease in his brow. Maybe he was realizing the futility behind destruction, the empty void left in its aftermath. "You're right," Jake admitted, lowering his voice but amplifying his intention. "I can't change anyone. But I will change myself, and I will protect what I love. You can either stand in my way or step aside." The leader scoffed, but beneath contempt lay an undeniable flicker of hesitation. Something in Jake's unwavering gaze seemed to breach the armor of intimidation. The remaining men flexed their hands. The tension thickened with their conflicting thoughts. Maybe you think you found forgiveness in playing house with your kittens, the leader spat. But what happens when the real storm comes? Will you still stand in the rain when it gets heavy? The day I stop standing is the day I cease to exist, Jake replied, unwavering. And if you're alive enough, you'll know that light can exist even in the thickest storm. An unforeseen stillness creased the air, as if nature itself paused to listen. Jake couldn't discern whether it was concern starting to bloom in their hardened expressions, or mere curiosity. It didn't matter. He had taken a step forward, and his words hung heavy with the power they wielded. Would they choose to resist this budding sense of solidarity, or would they consider the prospect of hope he had laid before them? With each heartbeat echoing against the fierce rain, the answer sat precariously at the edge of revelation. With the tension piercing the space, Jake clenched his fists, anchored in a stalemate between conflict and understanding. The moment felt alive, a catalyst teetering between confrontation and an unexpected truce. As uncertainty settled into the air, suffocating and electric, Jake realized that he might not escape this moment completely intact. But if there was a chance to turn hardship into healing, he would take it. The inflection point of choice loomed over them all, and what would come next might decide their fates. But even as he held the ground, something deeper tugged at him. A yearning to not just confront adversaries but to challenge himself in the very act of kindness and forgiveness. A new resolve. How would he attempt forging the future he dreamt of without succumbing to the easier wrath of vengeance? In that charged atmosphere the storm cracked, but within Jake a new storm began to swirl, beckoning him toward action. A challenge he had yet to fully embrace. The men before him suddenly became not just adversaries, but potential allies trapped in their bitterness. What would he choose next? Would he extend an olive branch or hold tight to the sword that had long defined him? A choice loomed, and Jake's heartbeat quickened, reborn continually in the unforgiving deluge. Jake's heart drummed insistently as he stood at the precipice of decision, the rain beating down like the weight of 1,000 expectations. His gaze flickered among the hesitant faces surrounding him. Each man was a mirror, reflecting whispers of his past struggles and failures. He stood there, poised in the storm, wrestling with the gravity of his intentions. Could he turn his confrontation into a call for change, not just for himself, but for them too? Underneath the rage and bravado, he sensed their uncertainty. The leader's expression might have held contempt, but that flicker of hesitation reignited a thought that had begun to take root in Jake's mind. Perhaps this confrontation offered a rare opportunity, not just to challenge their negativity, but to redefine who he was becoming. "Tell me," Jake began, voice steady, "what do you fear most?" The question hung in the air, an unexpected shift in the battle. The leader took a step back, caught off guard by the vulnerability in Jake's inquiry. Silence enveloped the clearing, punctuated only by the steady rain. Jake felt as if they were suspended in time, exploring an uncharted territory of emotion and understanding. This was no longer a contest of wills. It was a dive into raw honesty. The leader clenched and unclenched his fists, unwilling to yield but struggling with the unexpected depth of the conversation. "Fear is weakness," he finally growled. "But weakness is part of being human," Jake countered, his own emotions surging to the forefront. "I've learned that fear has power, but it doesn't define us. What if we used it as a catalyst instead?" A ripple of tension coursed through the men, a powerful force that mingled with the rain. Jake felt a pulse within himself, a growing conviction that words alone might shift the tide. He wasn't merely trying to pacify them. He was extending a possibility, a refuge from the shadows that had haunted them for so long. The leader's expression softened momentarily, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath the hard exterior, a flicker of someone who could also be broken. "What's in it for us?" he sneered, regaining the upper hand. "Redemption," Jake replied, the weight of his own past crystallizing under the pressure of the moment. "Think about it. What if standing together could lead us to something greater? Not just out of fear, but out of choice." Something shifted beneath the surface in the air, palpable and real. The remaining men exchanged glances, doubt and intrigue mingling within their hardened features. Jake felt emboldened. This was not just about facing down an enemy, it was about offering an alternative to their current lives swallowed by anger and resentment. What followed was a quiet hum. Conversations ignited like flickers of light in a darkened room. Jake soaked in their words, their tangled thoughts weaving a narrative he had long since abandoned, the notion that they could actually build something meaningful together. Overwhelmed, Jake breathed deeply, committing to his own transformation as deeply as he asked them to consider theirs. The pressure was mounting, and he understood that extending this olive branch would require a level of fortitude, compassion, and forgiveness that felt foreign yet exhilarating. Then it hit him, a revelation about himself. He wasn't just a man fighting a personal battle anymore. He was evolving into a catalyst of change. This mindset had to extend beyond this moment and resonate into his daily life, shaping how he viewed his worth and his role among others. In that instant, under a sky ignited with electric bursts, Jake fully grasped the gift and burden of his empathy. He had been through storms of his own, but if he could navigate through his inner chaos while extending love and kindness, perhaps they could too. "Join me," he said suddenly, gripped by an urgency he couldn't contain. "Let's forge a new path together, where we're not defined by our fears, but by our courage to rise above them." The question hung in the air, tantalizing yet raw. Would they accept his offer or continue to dwell in shadows, preferring the comfort of their grudges? Jake's heart raced beneath the brewing storm. He could feel change lingering just beyond reach, ready to spark at any moment. All he had to do was offer that chance. Would they take the step forward together, or would this moment dissolve into the storm? The choice was theirs. But Jake was ready to engage with whatever came next. Jake's breath quickened as he awaited a response, the storm intensifying around them, mirroring the turmoil inside. There was a moment, heavy with anticipation, when eyes met, a flicker of recognition igniting in the faces surrounding him. Among the hardened expressions, some appeared to soften like wet clay yearning to be reshaped. "Why should we trust you?" one of the men called out, his voice sharp but wavering, betraying an underlying uncertainty. "Because," Jake said, digging deeper into his resolve, "we've all worn the masks of anger and resentment for too long. I'm asking you to take off your masks, just as I have. Let's confront our pasts together, instead of letting them dictate our futures." Every word felt like a dagger into his own old habits. The truth resonated within him. There was no path toward a new future unless he was willing to shed the skin of his own fears. The leader, Adam, moved forward slightly, uncertainty eclipsing his previous bravado. "And what if we follow you into the abyss?" he challenged, his tone less combative. "There's a chance we may fall," Jake admitted, his voice steady despite the weight of the vulnerability. "But there's an even greater chance we will rise, stronger and more united. The abyss is one way. We have the power to create a different story." The murmurs among the group kicked up like swirling leaves caught in the wind. Jake's heart energized with the flicker of hope. Yet he knew he had to be more than just a voice among them. He needed to anchor their collective anxieties in shared experiences. He recounted a time not long ago when his own life felt like a dead end. Trouble had become a familiar friend, and he had been content to wear it like a badge. Yet through pain and introspection, he had discovered that redemption wasn't just a cherished possibility. It was a conscious choice, one that required effort and teamwork. "I asked myself," he continued, vulnerability spilling from his voice, "what if I had chosen differently? What if I hadn't let my past dictate my future? And so I stand here, not as a leader but as a fellow traveler who knows the weight of regret and the exhilaration of release." Jake's words hung in the air, igniting a flicker of connection. The rain drummed steadily, but beneath it the tension ebbed. He felt as if they were teetering on the brink of a cliff, the vast unknown stretching out before them. Still, he sensed the shadows of internal conflict lingering. His heart thumped irregularly as each face shifted from resentment to contemplation. Would he be able to inspire a crack in the armor they all wore? Would they rise to meet the challenge of their own transformation, or cower in the comfort of their old patterns? "Look around you," Jake urged, his voice piercing through the storm. Do we want to continue hiding in fear, or do we want to be defined by our courage? The choice is ours to make, but choices are worthless without action. Just then, a glimmer of something akin to hope surfaced amidst their group. One man stepped forward, his face still hard but eyes clear. I'm willing to try, he stated, an exhale of tension releasing from the group like air from a balloon. Then let's take this first step together, Jake said, adrenaline surging through him. The ripple of curiosity transformed into unspoken agreement as others began to nod, and he felt a weight lift slightly. But a new uncertainty gripped Jake's heart. Each step required more than words. It would demand their vulnerability, possibly revealing hidden disappointments and resentments that could unravel their progress. As they began to congregate into a cohesive unit, Jake wondered, was he truly prepared to face not only their shadows but his own? The revelation danced just out of reach, compelling him to confront the ghosts haunting his past. The moment to move forward had arrived. But could they genuinely push through the memories that threatened to pull them back? The answers loomed on the horizon, waiting just beyond the storm. Jake felt an electric current run through him as the group began to form around him, a hesitant unity taking shape. The collective energy was palpable, a fragile bud determined to bloom in a storm, yet still afraid of the sudden gust that could tear it apart. His gaze roamed over the faces illuminated by the erratic flashes of lightning. Each person bore the weight of their past. He could see it etched in the lines around their eyes, the set of their jaws. The torch of hope he had ignited now needed nurturing. But how could he keep it alive? You're all tired of the shadows, right? Jake pressed, forcing his voice to remain steady. Every one of you has a story to share. Let's not fear them. Let's embrace them. The silence that hung in the air was both daunting and promising. The man who first stepped forward, still leaning on his skepticism, stared intently at Jake. You talk about stories, but what if we're just a mess, a collection of failures, buried deep? Jake remembered his own narrative, cluttered and dark, riddled with regret and mistakes. A lump formed in his throat as he responded. We are more than that mess. Every mistake has taught us, made us stronger in ways we often overlook. We simply need to sift through it all and decide what we keep and what we discard. As he spoke, he felt an unfamiliar surge of confidence. It dawned on him that his own story had equipped him to face this moment. He remembered the hours spent analyzing his past, wrestling with demons that had nearly consumed him. In those moments of introspection, he had unearthed the lessons buried deep within. Perhaps he could guide these people through their own excavation. Tentatively, one woman stepped forward, her voice quavering. I haven't shared this with anyone, she began. But I lost my family years ago. I always blame them for leaving without saying goodbye, and it's made me angry at the world. As the words tumbled out, Jake felt a softening ripple around the group. This loss, it's a part of you, Jake encouraged. You carry it and it shapes you, but it doesn't have to define you. He saw a flicker in her eyes, a recognition that struck him, how her despair could transform if she chose to move forward rather than remain stagnant in pain. As more shared their burdens, Jake realized this was an exercise in vulnerability, not only for them but for himself as well. Each revelation felt like peeling back a layer of armor surrounding his own heart. The truth settled uncomfortably in him. He too was responsible for hiding from the vulnerabilities he preached against. What about you? One of the men challenged, eyes narrowing slightly. What are you holding back, Jake? The question hung heavy in the air, threatening to summon his own ghosts. Jake opened his mouth, frozen for a moment in self-doubt. Would he really expose the fragments of his past? The words rushed from him before he could reconsider. I had everything and still lost it all to my own choices, to addiction, to anger. I didn't see it until I was empty, alone. But I've learned it's never too late to rise from the ashes. The group shifted, exchanging glances that held new understanding. Jake felt their collective trepidation dissolve into a shared connection, evidence that they were weathering the storm together, one heartfelt revelation at a time. With the storm still raging around them, Jake posed the question that loomed larger than any physical challenge they faced. Are we willing to confront ourselves? Are we ready to take ownership of our stories and shape a new narrative? The weight of uncertainty crept into his heart again. This was only the beginning. The real work lay ahead. Could he keep their fragile spirit from shattering under the strain of confrontation? He silently steeled himself, knowing the abyss they faced could lead to salvation or despair. And as they murmured tentative agreements, Jake felt a new dread knot in his stomach. What awaited them on this journey through the shadows? The uncertainty tightened like a noose, whispering hints of despair as their path twisted toward the unknown. The atmosphere shifted as Jake looked out over the group, their faces illuminated with flickers of insight and fear. Each story unearthed whispered a truth that resonated with his own, yet uncertainty gnawed at him. Was this collective acknowledgement enough to sustain their momentum? Suddenly, the sound of thunder roared overhead, an ominous reminder of the tempest that raged outside. But this time, the noise was almost a comfort. Its cadence mirrored the pounding of his heart, raw, unvarnished, and resolute. It was time to press further. Let's take a moment, Jake suggested, sensing their tension. Think about what you've just shared. Picture your story as a landscape. Is it a war zone, a serene meadow, or perhaps a maze? Whatever it is, imagine walking through it, witnessing the shadows, the blinding spots. What do you see? A pensive silence enveloped them, broken only by the sound of the rain hammering against the roof. Jake watched as they each retreated into their minds, wrestling with their internal battles. He seized the moment, allowing himself to visualize his own narrative, trapped in an ever-turning spiral of regret. What if we could rewrite those landscapes? He pressed on, feeling the spirit in the room shift. What choices could we make to emerge with clarity? I did it. I turned my pain into a purpose. If I can, so can each of you. A slight grin broke on the face of the woman who had first spoken. You really think it's that simple? Like flipping a switch? Jake couldn't help but chuckle. If it were simple, we'd all be thriving. The truth is, it's messy. It's tears and laughter and every chaotic experience in between. But embracing the mess is key. He thought of the countless nights he had spent wrestling demons alone, how the weight of isolation crushed him further. You will have moments when doubt creeps in, he said, his voice firm, yet empathetic. It's not about conquering those doubts. It's about learning to dance with them. Watching the group, he saw the initial hesitance turning into subtle acknowledgments. Each nod strengthened his resolve. Together, let's explore ways to refine that narrative. Our stories are powerful. They can ignite changes and inspire hope. It's not just about what we've faced, but what we're willing to confront. A man from the back stepped forward, his hands trembling. Okay, Jake, I'll bite. What's the next step? We can talk about our pain forever. How do we move forward? Jake felt a rush of adrenaline at the challenge. We distill our stories into actionable goals. What's one thing you can do this week to confront your past? A simple step forward can lead to monumental change. For me, it was seeking help. For you? The group lit up with ideas, bouncing energy back and forth like a wave. It was exhilarating. Jake realized how crucial it was to emphasize actions over words, to create momentum that could rally against the tide of inconsequence that threatened them. Yet still, a nagging sense of doubt remained. Would they all commit? Would he be able to continue facilitating this vulnerable exploration? The weight of his untested leadership pressed against him heavier than any storm raging outside, defining moments slowly crystallizing beneath that pressure. And then the man's voice rang out again, cutting through the energy like a knife. What if we fail? The room fell into an anxious hush. The question was raw and real, glistening with the possibility of their fears becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. Jake inhaled sharply, understanding that this was not just a practical step forward, it was a call to confront their deepest vulnerabilities. He met the man's gaze, stealing his own. What if we don't? What if we discover we are stronger than we ever imagined? That's what this journey is about. The time has come to face not just our past, but our potential. Jake's invitation hung in the air, a crossroads steeped in uncertainty, and in that moment, he knew the true test awaited. Not the stories shared, but how they would navigate the paths ahead. The call for bravery was immediate and real, urging them to take the first step. But would that leap of faith shatter the fragile unity they had begun to build? The thought clawed at him, making his heart race as they held the weight of possibility in their hands. Jake stood at the precipice of uncertainty, aware that every word he uttered now carved deeper into the frail sense of safety they had begun to construct. The flickering lights reflected in their eyes, a combination of hope mingled with apprehension, spurred a new urgency within him. He needed a plan. "You know," he began, pacing slowly in front of the group, "the fear of failing often emerges because we're fixated on avoiding it, rather than embracing the lesson that can accompany it. Instead of worrying about failure, let's focus on what success looks like." Something shifted in the gathered faces. Curiosity began to outshine fear. Jake could see the gears turning, each individual wrestling with how victory could manifest in their lives. He pressed on, aware he needed more than just words to carry them forward. "Let's imagine what our successes might entail. Picture the future version of yourselves that overcame their struggles." He gestured broadly, encouraged by their brightening expressions. "What do they look like? What choices did they make that led them here?" Eager murmurs floated through the air as the group engaged with the idea. But lingering around the edges was the unease of doubt. Jake felt it too, a gnawing uncertainty, bidding him to retreat into safer dialogue. Drawing a sharp breath, he steered clear of any hesitation. "Let's ground ourselves in actionable terms. Today isn't just about dreaming, it's about planning. Who can share a specific goal they can set for themselves in the coming week?" He saw the hesitation return in some of his audience. Angela, the woman who had first spoken up, looked particularly torn. Her eyes darted, wrestling between desire for change and the comfort she found in familiarity. "But what if I can't accomplish it?" she asked, vulnerability creeping into her tone. "Let's embrace a different perspective," Jake responded, his voice steady. "What if we focus on the journey? Many of us come from places where success felt far-fetched, but every step forward is an achievement worth celebrating. We need to redefine failure as a temporary setback rather than an ending." Jake's assertion resonated deeply, catalyzing energy among the group. They began to murmur to one another, tossing ideas back and forth, each thought buoying them higher. Eyes gleamed with stories. Plans started forming like sketches coming to life. Jake focused intently on Angela, noting the shadows play across her face, marking her internal struggles. "What's one thing you've always wanted to try but hesitated to pursue? Identify it. Grab it by the reins." "I guess I've always wanted to take a painting class, but I didn't know if I was good enough," she confessed quietly. The room hushed, and Jake felt the weight of her admission settle against them. "It's not about being good enough, it's about exploring that creative release," he replied empathetically. "Art can be a path to understanding yourself better. What if you committed to just one class, one moment of self-exploration?" As her fear transformed into contemplation, Jake felt emboldened. "We'll hold each other accountable. One class, one commitment. That's how we begin rewriting our chaos into clarity." The mood shifted, a current of determination igniting within the individuals in the room. Each voice began to emerge, sharing personal hopes woven with hesitations, fears giving way to the prospect of progress. Yet beneath the rising tide of enthusiasm, Jake's own insecurity simmered just below the surface. Would he truly be able to guide them through turbulent waters? His own commitment to change felt fragile against his uncertainty. A rising voice shifted the energy back. "What if we really open ourselves, but then we find nothing changes?" The room quieted again, anxiety returning with palpable force. Jake met the gaze of the one who spoke, challenging the question fiercely. "That's the risk, isn't it? But think of the opposite. What if everything changes for the better? What if everything we dread becomes the catalyst for growth?" As the room fell back to a contemplative hush, Jake couldn't shake the familiar spiral of doubt. Torn between pushing forward and fearing the plunge into vulnerability, he realized the defining test lay ahead. Could they, together, confront their insecurities? And if they stumbled, would they find the strength to rise again? Determined to forge a path through uncertainty, he took a step back and surveyed the group, their determination radiating. Yet the fear of faltering, of losing this newfound momentum, lurched painfully in his chest, leaving him breathless. With a final deep breath, he asked, "Who among you is ready to commit to opening that door?" The question hung heavy in the air, charged with tension and the promise of the unknown, as Jake braced himself for their answers. The wind howled as Jake stood resolute, the storm echoing the chaos within. The collective energy of the group shifted with each breath, pregnant with possibility. He had pushed them toward vulnerability, yet uncertainty loomed like thunder overhead. Would they embrace change or shrink back into the shadows of their pasts? Commitment requires courage, and he began, his voice resonating through the electric atmosphere. It's the lifeblood of our growth, and it's not easy. But... He paused, locking eyes with each person in turn. If we want to rewrite our narratives, we have to be prepared to take that leap to act despite our fears. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jake sensed a budding resolve amid uncertainty. He needed them to see their power, to recognize that through shared experiences, they could accomplish the transformative journey ahead. "What's stopping us?" he asked, challenging them to confront their hesitations. Fear? Doubt? Isolation? "People don't change overnight, Jake," Adam countered, defiance mingled with a hint of curiosity. "What's the time frame? How do we measure success?" Jake inhaled, emotions swirling deep within, yet he stayed focused. Change is not a linear path with miles plotted out. It's an intricate tapestry woven with both progress and setbacks. Success is in taking those first small steps courageously, and being willing to face the storms that follow. The group exchanged glances, embers of hope igniting amidst their shared trepidation. They began to peel back layers of their lives, in a remarkably beautiful, albeit messy, reveal. "What if," Jake continued, softening his tone, "each of us commits to one step this week? Something that stirs the heart? Something that challenges those shadows? Then we reconvene and share." A wave of encouragement rose, solidifying the bond they had begun to forge. It felt like they were weaving a safety net together, each commitment a thread reinforcing their collective resolve. The commitment discourse turned lively as ideas flowed freely around the room. From seeking therapy to tackling older grudges, each individual orthodoxy melted away, giving way to their distilled truths. In the corner, Angela raised her hand. "I'll try my painting class. I'll commit to going to at least one session." She smiled, her earlier fears dissipating in the glow of newfound resolve. "I'll reach out to my brother and see if he's willing to talk," another member chimed in. The courage radiating from one person's commitment inspired the next, a palpable chain reaction of vulnerability blossoming. Yet the more they committed to their small steps, the more Jake recognized the looming weight of his own transformed narrative. Suddenly, it was no longer just about them. It was about him, too. Vulnerability was not just a means of connecting, but a pathway toward his own redemption. He felt a stirring urgency to own that truth. "And me?" he announced boldly, the words tumbling from his lips like a determined proclamation. "I'll confront the parts of myself that still believe I'm just a gunslinger, a forgotten shadow. I will delve into my own past, face my fears head-on by reconnecting with the people I lost." A moment of silence hung like tender dew, followed by a wave of recognition swelling in the room. Jake felt the energy of their collective commitment radiate like warmth on a spring day, solidifying into a bond as they all faced their pasts together. "We will check in, every single one of us," Jake declared with newfound confidence, "and we will be each other's support. Change isn't a solitary endeavor. It requires a community of caretakers." He looked out over the group, feeling a sense of gratitude washing over him. They were all mere fragments navigating through fear, and yet they now stood on the cusp of rebirth. Each person there became a vital part of this unfurling tapestry. The winds howled through the cracks as he ended his speech. The storm outside began to wane. It felt as though the world itself was bearing witness to their transformation. The storms had always been inevitable. It was how they learned to weather them that would bring the greatest change. But just as the group began to feel buoyed and invigorated, Jake paused, realizing this was no mere chapter in his life. This moment crystallized something undeniably monumental within him. He had not just stepped into the role of protector, he had embraced the identity of a facilitator, an anchor to those searching for purpose, weaving together his own healing while lifting others. The actions he had taken, the support he had nurtured framed his pursuit. The journey toward growth for himself and others had unveiled a new calling, one steeped in mutual respect and evolving strength. Jake breathed out the heaviness still lingering in his chest as he finally understood that every choice led to a catalyst for growth. This storm was merely the beginning of stepping into a world where darkness didn't have to shatter them. It could metamorphose into something infinitely more beautiful. The strength, resilience, and compassion they carried forward together. As the last of the rain fell, he plotted the way ahead, ready to emerge from the shadows. The journey he once feared now illuminated with the possibilities he not only dreamed of, but was getting closer to achieving. With a renewed sense of purpose, Jake surveyed his allies, sensing their individual convictions fused into a collective might. No longer shadowed by doubt or despair, they had become a living testament to redemption, a change initiated not just in words, but in the very essence of who they had chosen to be. This time, when Jake finally allowed himself to smile, it was not with hope, but with the undeniable certainty of achievement, the kind born of courageous choices, collective resolve, and an unyielding commitment to embrace the storms yet to come. And as they began plotting the course for the next gathering, a wave of elation washed over him. Jake had not just found a lifeline for himself, but had steered a disparate group out of darkness and into the light. A rediscovery neither of them anticipated, yet deeply craved. He was free, not only from the ghosts of the past, but from the constraints of a broken identity. The countdown to their reunion began, marked by small, excitable steps they would take as individuals and share, all of them leaving behind a legacy of growth, one he finally understood was worth fighting for. Now the threshold lay ahead, waiting for every single one of them to march toward a brighter tomorrow hand in hand. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. You need to subscribe now.